Now we have understood about what exactly the API is, how exactly the HTTP works, and how exactly the promises works. Okay, now we will go ahead with some APIs. Okay, first one is the Fetch API. So Fetch API is a modern web API provided by the browsers that allows you to make HTTP requests to server from JavaScript. So now and here are some key things to know about the Fetch API. Okay. Now here, one thing mentioned, Fetch API is a modern web API provided by the browsers. But now Node.js created their own Fetch API and it's get embedded inside the JS. And now all the functionalities have been written by themselves. Okay. So now the dependency, because in the last 2022 it's been added inside the Node.js. Okay, we will discuss that thing. I just want to show you one blog based on that also, but let's understand first what exactly the Fetch API is. So it's a simple interface that allows you to make get, post, put, delete, and other HTTP requests. So I hope that in a previous video we already discussed about get, post, put, and delete requests. So it uses promises. So we also covered what exactly the promises, how they work, and how it get called, resolve, reject, and all these things we already covered in a previous video. So that's why I have introduced that thing to you before the Fetch API. So it uses promises, which makes it easy to handle asynchronous action. So we need to provide the asynchronous and await and all these things, okay, by means of a promises. But Fetch API by default it handles all that thing. We don't need to worry about it. We just have to follow the related syntax as per our requirement. So fetch method is used to initiate the request and it will returns the promise to you. Okay, so fetch method taking one parameter as an URL where you want to send the request and it returns you the promises in the form of a then. Okay, what if the promise resolve and what if the promise reject? So then dot cache dot finally you can put it as per your requirement. So when the responses is received, another promise is written that resolve the response object. So we will first we get the response, but we want the data from the response, right? As per your requirement, basically, if application wants all the data put inside whatever there is inside the response, we want that data like status code or response query and all these things. So if you want to if you want to use it, you can go ahead with the response, but mostly we want data. So another promise get generated return to resolve the response object. So here in this example, as we can see, we are calling the fetch API inside the use effect. Now there is a one more thing, like, okay, we are calling the fetch API, but when we are calling, we want some kind of instances where this particular functionality get executed. So we are executing it inside the use effect, okay, for our betterment, for the confirmation, right? So use effect, this thing also we will cover it in one more video, why always this kind of API call should be there inside the use effect. That's it. The reason is simple thing. Use effect is a useful for the instance or events based thing. Okay, so I want that the fetch API request for the particular API when the component get loaded, mounted, okay, then it should make a request again when some state variables get changed. So there are the different different requirements are there where we are going to the, but better uh, location is inside the use effect. So we are calling the fetch, we are requesting for this particular API. It's giving us the response in the form of a promise. The response is there. Then we are returning that response with the data. Again, one more promise, data received. We are setting that data to our state variable. And if some issues or errors happen, then we can catch it dot catch dot finally. Now you can extend the code. Whatever the data we have received, we are storing in the state variable, and that data we are fetching here inside our component or inside our markup. So this is the simple execution. Okay. Now, when you will understand it, if you are aware about HTTP, all these methods, if you are aware about promises, how it works, and how exactly why there are two dot thens and all these things. Okay. So that thing we already covered in a previous video. If you still are not clear with it, go ahead. And if you still have any queries, we will discuss it in a Q&A session. Now, the very interesting, I think I want to show you this thing. Okay. So the fetch API is finally stable in a Node.js. So the history of a web request is like we are using the XML data via HTTP. So we are previously using XML HTTP request, and we are going to handle each and everything manually. There are the lots of chances that we haven't handled some certain situations. We have to make it a little bit synchronous, and some configurational things we have to write with the help of a XML HTTP request and responses. So this is the history of a web request. But now, okay, in 2015, there is an introduction of a fetch API, but it's launched by the browser. Okay, so it's a browser dependent, and Node and all these things saying, say, okay, I don't want any making the asynchronous call in a web applications. And one significant advantage of fetch over XML HTTP request is that it leverage promises. Okay, totally based on a promises. So we handle either or situations. We able to handle the successful execution or failure, and it's following the simpler and cleaner API while avoiding the callback hill. Now, one more thing is with the XML request, XML HTTP request thing is nothing but a callback hill. Okay, so there are nested callbacks are there, and it calls as a callback hill, and we have to maintain it properly, and nested things are happening. So to reduce, to write that much of code, it says that okay, I will provide you the library, and that library you need to write only three or four line of code, and done with your API call. So though the API call been around for a while now, it wasn't included inside the Node.js because of some limitations. Okay, what are the limitations? You can check it. Mostly they don't want to be browser dependent that much. Okay, because this is provided by the web API streams, and um, which is a bot controller is there, and which wasn't available in a Node.js until recently. And they have overcome those problems. And long before the addition of Fetch API, the request model was most popular method, making the HTTP request in a node. It means that HTTP request, XML HTTP request thing is popular. But the JavaScript ecosystem large quickly involved newly introduced pattern and request absolutes. And crucial example here is a async and await. We have to do, we have to perform these things. So there was no provision for this in a request API. So we can't do these things. These are the some limitations, and due to this limitations, they are just lagging up. Okay, I don't want this now, but later on they have created their own API, and they have released their own Node.js version and included that fetch API in a Node.js. So stable release for they have just introduced, they have started including it in a 2018, and by means of a Node.js version 21, it means near about 2022, they have just included it inside the Node.js ecosystem, and offering a developer reliable and a standardized tool for the handling HTTP requests. This long awaited release adds the several improved features and benefits to the Fetch API, and confirming its position as a reliable and standardized option for making HTTP requests in a node environment. So, so finally it's been added successfully. They have written their own code. They are not browser dependent, and now they successfully Node.js added the Fetch API officially inside the Node.js. So that's why we are using it. And again, there is a one more library, which is again way ahead with Node, way ahead from Node, this Fetch API, which is nothing but Axios. So whatever the complexity of your application, you can select the related library. If you are comfortable with the XML HTTP request, you can go ahead. Again, if you are okay with Fetch API, go ahead. But still, Axios is my favorite one. They are providing lots of features and provide features to you. Again, furthermore, that if you don't want to use these things, you can go ahead with the React query. So that thing also we are going to cover. So what are the benefits, we already aware. So this is the one article I would like to introduce. I would like to show to you, okay, how exactly the evolution happens and how Fetch API introduced inside the Node.js. Now the promises things are, yeah, so we already aware about the promises are having the uh, pending, fulfilled and rejected. So we are fetching some APIs, and if it's still working, if still fetching the data, so it is in a pending state. If it return with the updated data or whatever the response you want, so it's a fulfilled, otherwise it's a rejected one. Okay. So this is the promise which has been written by the Fetch API. Again, it has been written by the Axios also. So all these libraries are using the same concept of a promise. Okay. If you understood promise, it will be really easy for you to utilize any API call by using any library. So that's why I'm focusing more on the promise. If you are okay, you can go through this particular MDN web docs about the JavaScript promise. I like the dark mode normally. So here it is, promise, resolver, and lots of things are there. Then what exactly the Fetch API? Okay. So how exactly it works? So Fetch API provides a JavaScript interface for accessing and manipulating parts of a protocol such as request and response. So it's a kind of a built-in library or interface which allows you to perform operations. Which operations? Request and response operations. So normally we call which method? Fetch method. That provides an easy and logical way to fetch the resources synchronously across net. So unlike the HTTP, XML HTTP request, this is a callback based API. Okay. So fetch is promise based. It's a callback based. Okay. Unlike HTTP, we don't need to perform the uh, sequential execution. Okay. So it's a callback based API, and fetch is promise based and provides a better alternative. Can be easily used in a service workers, and fetch also integrates advanced HTTP concepts such as a CORS, which is built in. Okay, you don't need to write separate coding and separate kind of a manual customized code for the course purpose. It is built in there. You can just other extensions to the HTTP. So all these things are built in, okay, in a fetch. So this is the normal functionality. You're just getting the response when you fire any query by passing it as a parameter to the fetch. You are getting the response. Response you need to convert as per your required data. Then you have to put it uh, whatever you want with that data. Okay, lots of supply requesting options. Okay. Now the fetch is not only fetch method only does not accept the URL, it accept the data also, right? If you want to perform the post functionality, okay. Now there are two functional, there are post, get, delete, put. Okay, so there are multiple functionalities are there. So it's not like you only pass the URL. Okay, in this example we are only passing the URL, but you can pass different data to your fetch method. Okay, so URL, just put a curly brackets, and in that curly brackets you can share whatever data you want with that URL. So it's a post method. Mode is CORS, cache, credentials, headers. You can pass, you can redirect. Okay, you can pass the route also. Okay, on which particular file or on which particular component you will redirect when you get a response or when you updated this thing. So all these things you can mention. Okay, and body, whatever the data you want to share, you can stringify it, json.stringify, convert that data as per the requirement, and share that particular, and you will get a response also, okay, whether you updated the database successfully or not and all these things. Okay, so everything is available. You can you not only able to put a get request, you also can give a post request also. Okay, and you can abort the fetch request. Abort it means you are sending the request, response came, but if you want to abort, if you want to stop that particular request, that thing also you can perform. Credentials included, obviously, with the help of a URL, you can pass whatever data you want, credentials, data, method, whatever type of a thing, you can share it. You can upload the JSON data, file, multiple files. Okay, so all these things we can pass. Now let's go ahead with the fetch. Okay, so it's a global function, and this method starts the process of fetching the resources from the network and returning promises that is fulfilled once the response is available. Okay, so same fetch method is there. You can go ahead with the resource and related options, syntax. A very you can continue with this docs also. So here it is, invalid header name. They are providing you the examples also how you can do it. So post request, get request, delete, and all this request. There are some examples also, you can go through it. So this is overall functionality of a fetch API. Okay. And if you want to fetch API CL, so services worker can go ahead with this HTTP access control course and the things. Okay, so basically we understood how API get fetch API get introduced, how exactly the promises works, and how exact it's like you can add multiple promises here in this example. You can see then okay, but what is the issue? That whatever the return is there of this first then is input of a second, then output of a second is a input for the third, like this the data has been passed. Okay, so it then returns promises and so further promises and further promises, like this it get executed. So let's go ahead. So I hope that overall functionality have you have understood about the fetch API. Now how exactly the functionality work? Okay, I have one drop images there. Okay, let's understand this particular image. Okay, how exactly the functionality, or how exactly the internal execution of a JavaScript code or a React code happens. Okay, so API thing is nothing but a JavaScript feature. Okay, so let's understand how exactly the things are going on internally. So basically, whenever we are executing some functionalities, okay, so there is a JavaScript engine, there are some global functions, and there are some functions on a call stack. Okay, so call stack, whatever the top function is the stack. Okay, so it gets fetched from the top. The for top function, what will do? It will just call the related methods. Okay, web API, and related functions, if it has a timeout, then it get registered. Okay, I want to execute it, but I want to execute it after 1 second. So it gets registered and it gets sent to the task queue. Okay, so this is the callback methods. Okay, which should be executed after certain amount of time. So as soon as the certain amount of time get completed, it get added to the stack at the top level. Okay, now what exactly the difference between the normal function call and fetch function call? Let's understand that. So consider we call the fetch function. Fetch function is try to complete the task. Okay, it takes some time. Okay, so whatever the time it should take, it will add that callback function in a separate queue. It's not adding it in a common queue. Okay, whatever the callbacks are there for the fetch, it will create a separate queue for it, and as soon as the task completed, it put at the top of the call stack. Okay, whatever the consider, you have a callback function and that should be executed after 2 seconds. And in between, what happens, this phase completed the functionality. So it will hold this 2 second functionality or 2 second callback, and it will first execute the callback by the fetch. So it's nothing but a kind of a priority queue, or we can say it as a micro task queue or a fetch queue. So fetch queue is having the callbacks, and that callbacks having the higher priority. So sometimes may happens whatever you have written in a time set timeout or time interval, they will hold back, and first if the task of the fetch get completed, so first it will go ahead and prioritize the callback of a fetch. So this is the importance, this is the feature, internal feature of a fetch. So whatever you have written inside the fetch, that will get considered and executed on a priority as soon as it's completed the resolve, as soon as it's completed or fetched the date. Okay, so next, let's understand how exactly the fetch works. So whenever we call the fetch, there are the two internal calls get set up. Okay, first call get to the sent to the browser or a node, and second is nothing but these are some private fields, okay, which has been fulfilled. Okay, what exactly the browsers, why we are sending to the browser? Because from the browser we are getting the HTTP request, and whether we are getting the data or not, that thing get defined. So simultaneously what happens, it's accept the request, and it will redirect to the network, and it will fetch the data. Either the data will get or not. Okay, as soon as if we get a data, then that data get fulfilled inside this array. Okay, and when we get error, this particular error, whatever the messages are there, it will get rejected. Okay, error, it means not like 404 is not an error. Okay, it's a response. 502 is a response. We are hitting that particular link and then we are getting something, and that is a response. So these things, 404 and all these things, it's not a error. Okay, so error, it means we can't reach, or some URL is missing, something went wrong. So that rejections happens. Okay. So when these arrays get fulfilled, one of the things get executed, either it's an array or it's a data, either it's error or it's a data. So whatever the thing is there, that thing get fulfilled, that thing get assigned to the data, and this data is merged to the response, and the response is a global memory. So we can access that particular response. So that's why whenever we are getting the response, we have to again request for one more promise, and we have to fetch the data, right? So we are getting it dot then response dot json, and then we are getting the data from it, right? Why? Because these fields are private fields, we can't access it, we can't control it. It is internally handled by these particular fetch method, and these are the private. Based on your request, it will get fulfilled or rejected. Whatever the thing is there, it gets sent to the data, and that data merged to the response, and then response is a global thing and we able to access it. So this is the way actually fetch works. And anyhow, similar way, the further Axios, fetch, or any kind of a library which is responsible for the API call is, anyhow they are working in such a way itself. Okay, so let's understand the examples practically. I have created one component named React Fetch API. Okay, so export default React Fetch API, and here, okay. Next, we want to return, and inside the return, we are just writing simple fragment. That's it. Now, as I have mentioned you that whenever you are writing um, any kind of a API callback, just put it in a use effect. use effect always accept one callback and this. Okay. So in a use effect, what we are going to do, we are going to accept fetch API. Okay. So basically here in this example, what we are doing as a callback, okay, we are calling the fetch functionality over here. Okay. So and okay, we need to put this particular data also. Fetch dot then dot then and dot catch. Now, whatever the sequence you are using, you can use. Okay. So fetch, first of all, what we need to do, we need to pass the URL. Okay. So URL is this I will take. Okay. This is the user basic info open API available. So we can put it here. Now, what we are going to do? What will happen when we are calling this particular HTTP JSON placeholder? Now, you can check it here. There are lots of free APIs are available. Okay, free APIs, and there are some fact APIs, cat APIs. Lots of free APIs are there, among which I found it little bit decent and useful. So I have used this one. Okay, so now inside the fetch API, what we are doing, we are just linking that particular API. Then API is giving us the response in the form of a promise. Correct? So promise is nothing but our response. Correct? So how we are going to accept the response? So inside the then, better to put it down. Inside then, what we will do, we'll just put this res arrow function res dot json. Okay. Now this is converted this response in the form of a JSON, and what we want, this is again returning us one response. And that response, what we are doing, we are just accepting that response and we are fetching the data from that response. Okay, it's returning. Just a minute. Let me show you how exactly. Now here it is. The JSON res.json. This particular statement is returning us something. Okay, and that we are catching it inside the data. And that data we are setting it to our whatever the state variable. Okay, so let me clear out this. Data, and let's create a proper arrow function here now, because we want to write some lots of lines. Okay, and this data, what we are doing, let's log it first. Data, and next what we will do, we will just set it. Okay, but we haven't created any variable. Let's create const data or data one, set data one is equal to use state. Okay, we are getting some arrays, so we are not putting it here, and here we are just setting it. Okay, so set data one, we are setting it with the date. Okay, fine. So in this example, let's format it properly and let's make some spaces so we'll get an idea. Catch, okay, let's catch error. error, error, and we are just printing log out, log error. So here it is. Okay, we have written, we call the API inside the use effect. The fetch API is there. Then we are getting some responses from the fetch API. That response we are converted in the JSON format, and that data we are just printing and we are just setting it to the particular our state variable. Now here what we will do inside the markup, because only fetch getting the data is not sufficient. We want to display it also, right? So here we will just put one div, or directly we'll just iterate it. So data one dot. What we can do, we can iterate it by means of a map. Okay, inside the map, we will accept one parameter. Okay, data. We will just return something. Return bracket inside the return. Let's put div, close the div. Then inside the div, what we will do, d dot, oh, not like this, it's your expression, d dot, let's put it as a name. Now what is the problem? Okay, key. So we'll put that key is equal to, in a curly brackets, d dot id. Okay. Before that, now I just want to show you this particular free API. What is there exactly? Control V. And until it gets loaded, let's format this existing code. So what we are doing, we set the data, whatever we fetch in from this particular API, we are fetching it and we are setting that particular data to the data one, and then we are iterating through the data one, and whatever the name value is there and ID value is there, we are fetching it individually and we are putting it inside the markup. Okay. So USER, user. JSON placeholder. I just want to show you what exactly the JSON placeholder is. Why it's taking so much? Okay. Just a minute. Okay. It's get loaded. Now here you can see the data. Okay. ID, name, and all these things are available. From this huge amount of data, I don't want to fetch everything, okay, and display it on our application. I just want the key thing, ID, okay, because it's showing the key related error. So I have pasted that particular ID and put it to the div. And second one is that I have put it this particular name. So how much, what is the length, how many nodes are there? 10 nodes. So we want to fetch the 10 names, okay, from this particular API. Okay. Now let's save it and run it. So if you can see here, it's taking some time. If you observe, no, it's getting time. So initially it's showing you the API get, and now it's showing all these things. Okay, so 10 names are there. So like this, you can perform, you can access the data from any API, you can create your own API, your wish. So like this, you can get it. Similarly, you can fetch the data by means of Axios. Okay, so the way we are using here the fetch, right? So we are using fetch to fetch the data, then we are getting the promises, and then we are converting. The access is little one easy. Okay, whatever based on the methods you have to do, you have to pass it. Here also, access is also accepting the data in the form of a promises. Okay, that's what I'm saying, that if you're aware about the promises and all these internal features, how exactly the API gets called, any library is same. So because the core functionality, core logic of every library to fetch API is the same. Okay, so here also we are using, there are some advanced features Axios is providing over the fetch API. That is also we will try to understand. But same thing you can do here. Use effect instead of a fetch. We are using Axios. For that you have to import it. For that you have to install it. Okay, npm install Axios. Then this particular library will be available to you. Once it get available, you can use it, import it, and then you can call the get post method based on that particular reference. So when I'm calling the get, I'm getting the response from this particular HTTP. Okay, so it's somewhere URL went wrong here, but yeah, I will get some response for this particular get request. I'm getting the response in the form of a promise, and response directly we can access, and we can directly fetch the data. So it is little bit simplified way, some extra features provided by the Axios for to handle the more complex applications, how it is differed and all these things we will get to know ahead. But the same thing you will get when you are executing this. Okay, let's try. Same thing is there. Okay, fine. Now let me check. Okay, fine. So here it is. I'm trying to execute two application on a one foot. So just a minute. Okay. So inside the app, I forget to fetch it. Okay. I can't fetch both the things at a time. Okay. So what I have done, I just added this fetch API component inside the app. So we'll fetch the data by means of a fetch API first, and then we will go ahead with the React one. Okay. So I forget to fetch it here. So next, let's run it. Control S. So same thing is there. Now, okay, we are getting error. Yes. So cannot read the properties of a null. Fine. We are not getting the thing. Why we are not getting the thing? Yes. Okay. So this something went wrong. Let me check it. Okay. Users. Let's copy it. Paste it properly. Control V. Okay. Now let's check whether we are getting the things. Okay. Next. Null, null, null. We are getting null. Why we are getting null? Cannot read the properties from null. Oh, okay, fine. Instead of a JSON, it should be a JSON method. Now let's check. Let's save it and refresh. Okay, here we done with the things. Now let's check it again. Okay, cannot read the properties from null. Okay, so null, yes, fine, it get refreshed. Okay, fine. Here we are getting something with the empty array. So now we are getting the array use effect. Whenever the component get mount, we are fetching the request. Now request is correct. Then whatever the response we are getting, we are converting it to the JSON. Then we are trying to print it, and then we are setting it. If something happen, error will come, and then we are iterating on the map. Let's check it. I don't find it will show. Now it will be correct one. Fine. So here we are getting the names by means of a fetch API. Okay. Now we will understand with the Axios one. Okay. So what I will do, I just comment this control, and I'll just comment out this. Okay, and I'll just import this comment and this one comment out. Now in this, what we are doing, Axios same fetch API we are calling. We are sorry, Axios API we are calling. We are calling the same link. We are getting the data and same thing. Okay, let's save it and let's check it. Refresh. Now we are getting the data with of a Axios. So both the examples are of a get data. Okay, so here it is. Sorry for the disturbances. Here it is. So we covered the get request. Now in the next video, we will cover the post request by means of a fetch as well as access.